Welcome everybody. It's 7 o'clock and we are going to get started with tonight's dessert with discussion. If it's your first time joining us, you might be confused by our program title, but Dessert with Discussion has been happening at the Kellogg Biological Station since 2005. So it's over a 15-year program, and typically we get together in person and serve delicious desserts alongside an excellent presentation by an MSU scientist and have some discussion together. Since it's not safe to do that in today's world, we have gone online. So welcome to the very first virtual Dessert with Discussion. So I'm sorry to say I can't provide you with desserts for tonight, but I hope maybe you have a dessert or a favorite beverage by your side. What we can provide is some really great science, a great scientist and presenter, and some good discussion tonight. So that is our goal, and we are happy that you are here to join us for that. So I want to say welcome. My name is Kara Haas. I oversee community outreach for the Kellogg Biological Station, and it's my great pleasure to coordinate the Dessert with Discussion program. Tonight's sponsors are Greenstone Farm Credit Services, Wild Ones of the Kalamazoo area Wild Ones, and the Kalamazoo Bee Club. So special thanks to that financial sponsorship, which allows us to do a little extra marketing to get the word out about this program. So if you're new to Zoom, which in today's age is doubtful, but if you are, welcome. Your mic is already muted and your camera's off, so only the panelists and KBSers can have that power right now. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, and if you have any technical issues, Misty will help you out in the chat. If you'd have a question for the presenter, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A function. So the chat, the Q&A, and your reaction button, raise your hand button are all in a little black bar that's sometimes at the bottom of your screen, or sometimes at the top, depending on if you're using a device or if you're using a computer and a browser. We are recording tonight's program, and I'll share the recording afterward on our YouTube channel and send you a link to that. And we're also live streaming and have an audience on Facebook right now. So you can see tonight's agenda. It's jam-packed with lots of great information. So I wish we were all here in person, but from the Kellogg Biological Station, I want to say welcome. KBS is MSU's largest off-campus facility. It's a research, education, and outreach station, and it's one of the best and most amazing field stations in all of North America, if not the world. So if you haven't been here to visit us yet, please come visit. We consider the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary to be our front door, so that's a great place to start your adventure if you haven't visited us before. Programs like this are not just my work alone. It takes a great team, so I want to say thank you to Sarah Carroll, Kara Barnes, and Misty Klotz for marketing, communication, and webinar support before and during this event, and to all the other KBSers that are joining us tonight. Thank you for your contributions to making KBS a great place and making the work that we do possible. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to our almost brand new director, Dr. Fred Jansen, to introduce himself and then to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kara, and the rest of the team for organizing this. This should be a great night. It's actually my first opportunity for Dessert with Discussion, and it's really a pleasure that this one is happening after such a long delay. The reason for introduction is that I'm the new director of the Kellogg Biological Station as of the 1st of June, so I've only been on the job a few months. As you can imagine, over the last 4 months, there hasn't been anything exciting going on, so it's been pretty boring. I'm just kidding. It's been an exciting ride so far in the last 4 months or so. And for what it's worth, I've transitioned from 26 years of being on the faculty at Iowa State University, where I was a professor in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences there. And I had extensive teaching and outreach responsibilities. I also did a lot of scholarly work, research, and most of that work centered on the ecology and conservation biology of reptiles, especially turtles, as you're probably gathering from the photos on the screen. I feel like one of the more important parts of the work that I did, it's kind of melded together the education, outreach, and research aspects of what I did at Iowa State University was founding a program called Turtle Camp, which occurred on an island in the Mississippi River between Illinois and Iowa. And it's a place where turtles nested, and we did that work for 33 years. And in the latter part of that time, with some of my students, we founded a program called the TREE program, which stands for Turtle Camp Research and Education and Ecology. And the point of that program was to bring traditionally underrepresented students in science out into the field to get exposed to real scientific research and be full-fledged participants in that work. And we hope either become scientifically educated citizens or scientists themselves or educators themselves someday. And most of them have done that. So in this particular set of photos, I should say, I'm in the middle of excavating the nest of a painted turtle, along with help from some of the students where we're a freshly laid nest, we're weighing and counting the eggs. And several months later, in September, the little inset photo on the lower left there is what we hope to find, a dozen or so painted turtles. So we did a lot more research than that, but that just kind of encapsulates some of the fun of it, the excitement of science and discovery. More important, though, than talking about me is to talk about our speaker tonight. We're incredibly thrilled to have Dr. Adam Ingrao with us for this event. Dr. Ingrao is the Veterans Liaison for the Michigan State University Extension, and he's an agricultural entomologist, which we'll all hear in more detail tonight. To be exciting. Beyond that, Dr. Ingrao is an Army veteran, a nationally recognized veterans advocate. He's even led efforts in particular to connect veterans with career and wellness opportunities in the agricultural sector. Furthermore, he's a founder and instructor of the MSU Extension Heroes to Hives program, which will be a centerpiece, I think, of tonight's presentation. But he's done even more than that. He's also directed, or been the former director anyways, of two nonprofits that serve farmer veterans in the state of Michigan. One of them called the Veterans in Agriculture Network, and the other, Farmer Veteran Coalition of Michigan. So he's been keeping busy. He's also earned for this work a ton of honors. I'm not going to detail all of those tonight, but it's not surprising given the great work that he's been doing. He's currently based in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, again, linked with MSU Extension. But before he joined us, he earned his Bachelor of Science degrees in Agriculture and Environmental Plant Science from Cal Poly University, and his PhD in entomology here from Michigan State University. So let's welcome Dr. Ingrao, and we look forward to a really exciting presentation, and I thank all of you for joining us tonight as well.
Well, thank you, Fred, very much for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen here with all of you, and we'll get started tonight. All right. Okay, so we should be all able to see this the screen, our title screen here. Again, my name's Adam Ingrao. I work for Michigan State University Extension as the Veterans Liaison for our organization. And what I'm going to talk to you all about tonight is a program that we have at MSU Extension called heroes to hives. And we'll kind of go through what was the catalyst that started this program, where the program is going, and kind of to give you all an overview of where honeybees are right now within our country. So let's move on to that. Well, the first place that we need to talk about anytime we talk about bees or pollinators in general is their importance to us as far as our food security is concerned. So that are insects are responsible for 1 in every 3 bites of food that we take. And honeybees play a very large role in those pollination services. And when we think of honeybees, the thing that I want you to think about is that, number one, honeybees are not a native species to North America. They are an introduced species. And so they're much like livestock when we think about honeybees in comparison to native bees. Now, the reason that honeybees are so important to agriculture, in fact, giving somewhere between $14 to $20 billion in pollination services annually to US agriculture, the reason that they play such an important role in agriculture is honeybees are on-demand pollination. When we have crops, say for example, crops that are non-native to the United States, that we produce a lot of agricultural crops that are non-native to the United States, oftentimes those bloom times that those crops have that are going to be the times in which pollinators interact with those flowers we will eat. Oftentimes the native pollinators, their times of emergence do not align with the necessary pollination times that some of our crops have. And so with honeybees, we literally can take a hive of honeybees and put them on a piece of land that needs pollination services when we need it. And that's why they're so important, giving that almost $20 billion worth of pollination services annually. In the United States currently, and for the last 20 years, we've been hovering around 2.5 million beehives in the United States. Now that may sound like a lot of beehives. I mean, we're talking 2.5 million. But just to illustrate just how few beehives that is, in the United States, we have the largest pollination event in the world. And that is almond pollination in the Central Valley of California, where 80% of the almonds in the world come from, that Central Valley. Every year, February is almond pollination season, and 80%, a full 1.7 million of those 2.5 million hives, 80% of them go to California for that one pollination event. And so to underscore that we're really, when we think 2.5 million, we're really not talking about a lot of excess bees. When we look at that over time, and this graph right here is illustrating on the y-axis the number of honey-producing colonies in the millions. And on the x-axis, we have years starting in 1945 and ending in 2007. And what you can see over this period of time is that 2.5 million that we're at right now is in fact the lowest population of colonies that we have had in the United States since pre-World War II. We have, since World War II, since the 1950s, we've been falling off of a cliff when it comes to honeybee population in the United States. Now, there's a couple things that have happened along the way that have really contributed to this. American foul brood was one of them, a disease that literally is fatal to most colonies that are interacting with it. That's something that almost brought the American beekeeping industry to its knees in the 60s and 70s. Then we have varroa mite. Varroa mite, you see here on this graph, popped up right in the mid-80s. It's an introduced species, not native to honeybees, but actually jumped species from another bee, Apis cerana, the Asian honeybee, when European honeybees were brought into the same ranges that Asian honeybees were occupying in Southeast Asia. The parasite feeds on the fat body of honeybees, which is a critical organ when it comes to storage of fats and actual biosynthesis of proteins. So this varroa mite feeds on that particular organ and causes a lot of issues with honeybees. And varroa mite is by far the #1 contributor to global honeybee loss, hands down, right now. in the current climate we're in. And you can see when we saw varroa mite introduced to the United States, we saw a big dip in population. We then have colony collapse disorder, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. Now, colony collapse disorder is something that came up in the mid-2000s, has gotten a lot of media attention, primarily affects commercial beekeepers, but to date, we as scientists still do not have a firm understanding of what is causing colony collapse disorder within our commercial beekeeping industry. And the reason for that is there are so many factors that affect commercial bees that it's very difficult to tease apart any of those factors to make any results or conclusions on results for research. So there are a lot of factors affecting that. But what we can say for sure is in the last 60 years, 70 years, we have seen a persistent loss of honeybees in the United States. In recent years, we've really started to look at this data of losses more closely. And what you see here is a graph on the y-axis, we have the percent loss, and on the x-axis, we have years. This is a graph from the Bee Informed Partnership. And what we see on this graph, and I'll just draw your attention to this last area right here, which is this last year. You can see that when we look at annual losses that beekeepers in the United States are still experiencing, we can see that last year, the annual loss for beekeepers in the US was almost 45%. For the industry to be considered sustainable, 15% annual losses is what we consider acceptable. So we, for the last 20 years, have been well above sustainable losses. And that has really gotten us to this point in time where the general public, folks like yourself, have really started to pay attention to honeybees in a much more reasonable or much more focused way than any time before. In fact, in 2013, honeybees were on the cover of Time magazine. And for an entomologist, that's pretty exciting to see an insect on the cover of Time magazine. But for the general public, that really says something because it's not typical to see an invertebrate on the cover of Time magazine. But what this illustrates is that the general public has really become aware that there are issues happening with honeybees, and that we need to stand up and face these issues head on, because honeybees play such a role in the U.S. agricultural industry. Over this same period of time, this last 20 years, our men and women that serve in the armed forces have been fighting wars in 2 different places for the last 20 years. And those men and women that have served our country so honorably, as they've come home from years of combat, multiple deployments, those individuals, as they transition from the military to the civilian sector, are at the same time that honeybees are facing all these issues, these men and women are looking for their next mission. They're looking for that next opportunity to serve. Because what I can tell you from my own personal experience serving in the US Army is that when I was injured in the military and discharged as a medically veteran, when I was sent home, I wasn't done serving. Although the Army was done with me, and maybe my body was not able to serve any longer, I, in my heart, was not done serving this country. And one of the biggest things that I wrestled with when I transitioned from the military, which was in the early 2000s, the height of opioids being the drug of choice for the VA, I was one of those individuals, discharged in 2004, couldn't walk when I left the military, sent to the VA, fed a steady diet of opioids, became addicted to those, and then really struggled with depression, the guilt associated with leaving my military unit, and the men and women that I served shoulder to shoulder to serving in Afghanistan and Iraq, some of those individuals never coming home. And the guilt that I carried with myself, knowing that those men and women were my family, and I was not there to have their back anymore. These are the types of things that weigh on us as veterans. And when I came home, I was no different, and I struggled. And it wasn't until I used my GI Bill to go back to school at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and taking a beekeeping class, my very first semester there, that I began to understand that there was something left for me to serve after I left the military. And I went from believing that I was serving our national security in my BDUs, my military uniform, to now believing that I was able to continue serving my country by protecting the most important managed pollinator on the planet and US food security. This experience completely changed my life. And this was the impetus, this was the catalyst for the Heroes to Hives program, was my own experience, transition from the military and finding an opportunity to continue to serve my country by protecting our national food security, by protecting this managed pollinator. So Heroes to Hives is a program that's been going on since 2015, a program that my wife and I started at our own farm in Lansing with just 5 veterans in 2015, which has now grown to the largest ag training program for military veterans in the country. We take our men and women that have served in the military and we take them through 9 months of beekeeping education. This education is comprehensive and includes both online and on-ground instruction, and allows our men and women to be able to take the knowledge that we give them and take that knowledge to go and continue serving their country, their communities, and their families by being beekeepers. We look at beekeeping as for our men and women that have served. We look at beekeeping as a hobby. A lot of folks are just looking for something to do, to keep them occupied, for something that they have to show up for. It's kind of like we had to show up in the military. You know, for those of you that have served in the military or have family that have served in the military, showing up is a big part of being in the military, and they'll definitely let you know if you're not showing up. But that's part of this being a hobby. Sometimes we just need a little something that needs our responsibility and our care. We look at this as a career opportunity. Many of the men and women that take our program are looking for a new career. You know, they're tired of working a 9-to-5 desk job. It's just not something that fits a lot of folks that have spent most of their lives working active duty military, doing all sorts of interesting, fun, exciting, you know, no day is ever the same type of work. And they're just looking for something different. They just can't handle that 9-to-5 desk job. And so this is a possible new career. We also look at this as an opportunity to develop community. This is an opportunity for us to come together as veterans again and serve shoulder to shoulder with one another in a cause that's greater than ourselves. That's what most of us are looking for, is that opportunity to serve something that is greater than ourselves. In addition, we look at beekeeping as therapy. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on into this lecture. But I truly believe that the apiary is a place for healing, both personal health and financial health. As a business owner, you can make some money with beekeeping. But as an individual looking for wellness opportunities and the opportunity to be able to practice mindfulness in an interesting setting, there's that happens too in the bee yard. So we get asked this question quite a bit. Why don't we allow, you know, everybody to participate in this program? Well, the reason is that we've tried to develop this approach because veterans trust other veterans. And we'll talk about these figures a little bit later, but in post 9/11 veterans, about 30% of us have disabilities that are either post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury, or a combination of the two. Individuals that are suffering from military injuries like PTS or traumatic brain injury oftentimes have trouble being in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar faces. And what we do by developing this veteran-centric education program is that we allow veterans that are in our program to put their guard down. They know that the men and women that they're training with are veterans. They know that they have that community there, that they don't have to look over their shoulder. A room full of men and women that got their backs. So we can drop in with one another very quickly through that veteran connection. In addition, we take this approach because we're trying to develop a community of support, a strong veteran beekeeping community that is able to support one another in times of need. And we have lots of examples of that have happened over the years, where individuals that are part of our program have assisted others. In fact, we've had for the last couple of years, our oldest veteran that has participated in the program, who's a Korean War veteran, been beekeeping for about 40 years, just does not have the physical ability to beekeep anymore. And we've had a post 9/11 veteran working with that beekeeper for the last couple of years to support that individual. So we can develop a community of support by supporting one another, just like we did in the military. We can also deal with veteran-specific issues, and that's a really important component of this because veterans come with baggage, myself included. A lot of us have disabilities, and we have injuries. Knees, ankles, back injuries are just commonplace within our demographic. And so that's something that we can address head on. What are some of the common issues you deal with, and how do we rectify those issues, or how do we address them in a safe format? In addition, and I spoke about this earlier, this is a new mission for the men and women that have served in our military. And this gives them the opportunity to continue that national service in a very meaningful way. Now, the idea of having veterans become beekeepers is not new. This is not something that is novel at all. And in fact, in World War I, during the height of trench warfare, we had many men that were coming back to the United States from overseas that were severely disabled because of what was happening in the trenches. And the Department of Agriculture at the time saw this as an opportunity to reach the to support the war effort. Again, supporting our national security, national service still happening for these veterans as they transition. And this is, again, coming back to what's important to veterans. This purpose, having purpose after you serve, is key to that transition. And so what happened during this period is that the Department of Agriculture actually was producing publications like this Beekeeping Opportunity Monograph that you see here, literally recruiting the service members that were coming back from the trenches to become beekeepers. And why? Well, number one, beeswax is a critical component of the war effort at this time. All munitions, all Navy ropes, all weapons that are going overseas, all coated in beeswax. And so there is actually a national need for beeswax. In addition, sugar was being rationed at the time. What other substance can be substituted with sugar that's very easy to produce and is a U.S. And so this was actually a very conscious effort to retrain these individuals to become the next generation of beekeepers. The individual that was tasked with this, his name is E.F. Phillips. And Everett Phillips, most of us who are in the beekeeping industry know him from his work at Cornell, but before Cornell, he worked for the Department of Agriculture and ran this veterans program. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the beekeeping industry, E.F. Phillips is a very well-known beekeeper, had an illustrious career at Cornell as an apiculturalist, and actually has a very amazing library section named after him, the E.F. Phillips collection, The Hive and the Honeybee, that stores some of the most important historical writings on beekeeping in a free format online. So E.F. Phillips, very well known, but this is what he was primarily known for at the time. All right. So kind of come to our program. So this is something that again is not novel, but I think that we have taken it to kind of a modern level with our program. So just to kind of give you an idea of the scope of the program and what we do. So since 2015, Heroes to Hives has trained 699 veterans in the art and science of beekeeping. We also allow dependents to participate in the program as well of participating veterans. And we've had to date 227 dependents participating in the program. These individuals come from 25 different states, and we estimate that right now our Heroes to Hives alumni are operating over 4,000 beehives in the US. We are the largest ag training program for military veterans in the country, and we hang our hat very proudly on that because we have really, I think, found a niche that a lot of veterans are interested in when it comes to kind of these opportunities after service, and beekeeping seems to be something that resonates. A little bit about our student demographics. 78% of our students have been males and 22% female, and that's actually a little bit better than the numbers that we have in the service. So we generally see about 15% of our service members are female, so we're doing even better than that. The other thing that we do track is our service-connected disabilities. So this is the number or the percentage of individuals that participate in our program that have a disability rating from the VA. So almost 60% of our participants have a service-connected disability. And that's something that we build into the workshops, that knowledge that we have a lot of folks that are dealing with some sort of disability that's service-connected. Okay, so the structure of the program. I will say this, the program is just not for veterans. So I should start by saying that. So it is for veterans, active, no matter where you are at on the globe, you can participate. We've had a couple students that have already contacted me for the coming year that are stationed in Germany and Japan. So you can participate from anywhere if you're active duty. We also allow National Guard and reservists to participate in the program as well, and then their dependents. So the main program is, the program itself is set up in kind of 3 different areas. So we have our main program, our workshops, and then we do special events as well. And I'll kind of take you through what those components are. So first, let's talk about the main program. The main program is really kind of the core of the educational components of the program. We offer the main program all online, and the program starts in March and ends in November. So it's a full 9 months of education. And during that 9 months, these individuals that participate in the program usually get somewhere between, I would say, 3 to 7 hours of lecture a month that is pre-recorded and sent to them in email. So we post everything on a private YouTube channel, and individuals get an email once a month that have all the links embedded in the email. They simply watch the videos, and then they can comment with questions in the comment section on those YouTube videos. So we cover things within this kind of core curriculum. This is really where all the kind of the base knowledge is built in. So we talk about biology of the organism, both at the individual level and the superorganism level. We talk about management that we do with honeybees, both seasonal management and management that we basically will do maybe a couple times a year. We talk about pests and pathogens, and we spend a lot of time talking about varroa mites, which we talked about just a little bit earlier, that parasite that is literally driving global honeybee loss. And it's so important for our beekeepers to understand the risks associated with it. I will tell you this, as an experienced beekeeper, the thing that we see when it comes to varroa mite is when our beekeepers, and this is my students included, when they start to take varroa management seriously is when their bees start surviving, period. And so if you're a beekeeper or someone on here that's thinking about honeybees, that is going to be your #1 thing to take care of as you're doing your first beekeeping year and from there on out, is managing varroa mite. And it is a huge part of our program. My students I'm sure get sick of hearing me talk about varroa mites, but it is a huge problem. So we focus a lot on that. And then we'll also get into things like habitat management as well. We also do a lot of veteran-specific things. So near the end of the season, actually next month, our November lectures that go out are focused on grants that veterans can apply for, or programs that support veterans to start their farms. We don't just focus on beekeeping a lot of times. We do get into other USDA programs and things like that support our beekeepers as well. In addition, when we have those lectures, like I said, they can make comments in the comment section where they can ask questions. Once a month, I go through those posts, and I take all the questions that have been posted, and then I record my answers to those questions in a webinar format, and then also post that. So essentially, the program is very self-paced, and that is something I think that a lot of folks like. One of the things that I will say that we are changing up this year in 2021 is we are going to offer a certificate of completion option, which we have not offered before, which will be based primarily on the online program and completing several assessments that we're developing over the course of the season. So that has not been something that has happened in previous years where individuals could actually get a certificate of completion, but that is something that we are offering in the coming year. All right, as far as workshops, workshops every season. We have 6 locations that we do on-ground training at in Michigan. Those locations would be KBS is one of them. Main campus in East Lansing is another one. We have a location that is a partnership with Ford Motor Company out in the Ypsilanti area. We also have a location at Lake City at our research station in Lake City. And then we have 2 locations in the UP, one in Newberry, which is my personal farm, and then one in Escanaba, which is at the MSU Community Garden out there. So we offer workshops at all of these locations every year. These are hands-on workshops where individuals can come together, get their hands dirty on working some bees, and get an opportunity to be able to chat with some fellow veterans. This is really where I think the rubber meets the road for our program, because this is where the community gets built. And I can't tell you over the years how many friendships that I have seen be made in the bee yard, and friendships for years past after individuals have left the program. So we are developing some very strong relationships with these workshops as well. We usually offer about 25 to 30 plus workshops a year. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a big impact on that, since we have not been able to have any face-to-face workshops this year. In lieu of those workshops, what we've had to do this year is that because of travel restrictions, even for MSU faculty, I have had to limit my travel. So, we're only be able to travel for necessary obligations, particularly around animal livestock. But what I've been doing in lieu of our workshops is that I've been filming virtual workshops at my own farm all season long to kind of replace some of that. So in the future years, we'll be going back to regular programming as soon as MSU restrictions get lifted. But currently, that's what we're doing to supplement that education that's been lost on. To be honest, there's no replacement for on-ground education. We're doing the best we can. But I think all of you probably realize that as well, especially those of you that are beekeepers that have been part of bee clubs that are used to meeting face-to-face, doing hands-on stuff, and just to not been able to do that this year. So a little bit of a unique circumstance, but typically we are in the bee yard all the time. And this is really, like I said, where the rubber meets the road. When giving people the opportunity to get that hands-on experience is really important when it comes to working with any sort of animal livestock. So in addition to our normal workshops, our on-ground workshops, we also do have what we call our therapeutic workshops. And these are workshops that generally we really focus on kind of some specific areas. So we do one workshop every season called Beekeeping with Disabilities. And this is a workshop that has been developed with Michigan Ag. You see a picture right here shows Stoller, who is our ag engineer for Michigan Agribility, demonstrating a homemade hive lift that he put together in his own workshop. So every year, Ned comes out and does a live workshop for us on accessible technologies for beekeepers. So for those of you who maybe are not as familiar with some of the physical obligations that you have as a beekeeper, beekeeping is a very physical activity. And these boxes that you see Ned lifting here with this hive lift, if those 2 deep 8-frame boxes were full of honey, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 pounds of honey, of honey on those 2 colonies. That's a lot of weight. And moving that kind of weight over and over again, especially if you have back injuries or knee injuries or ankle injuries or injuries to your hands or anything like that, that can be limiting. And we want to make sure that individuals understand that are taking our program that it doesn't matter what your disability is. We can assist you in becoming a beekeeper. And Ned plays a critical role in that. In addition, we have a new module that we're doing this year that is getting recorded for our November session, which is yoga for beekeepers. So beekeeping is a very physical activity. And I think just like a lot of agriculture, I'm a farmer myself. My wife and I run a 40-acre farm here in the UP. And, one of the things I constantly recognize is that, when we do physical activities, like we get ready to go for a run or go work out at the gym, we'll generally stretch because we know that we run the risk of injury if we don't stretch out those muscles before we really start to work them hard. As farmers, I don't know very many farmers that stretch before they get out and start doing chores. And that's something that I would love to advocate for today. But it is something that's very, very important, especially if you're dealing with long-term disabilities that are physical, is that taking the time to stretch out before you get to doing some very, very physical labor, which beekeeping is very physical. So we do that. We have also a module that we've been doing the last couple years that's called Beekeeping as Meditation. We call this our Healthy Hive, Healthy Me Clinic. And essentially, in a live setting, we have not done this year because this is a very difficult module to replicate online. But essentially, we take individuals through inspection of a beehive as a modality for active meditation. So the idea is that beekeeping is a therapy in addition to all of this other stuff that we've talked about. For veterans, this really rings true because we respond very well to physical discipline. You know, we are very used to having to do push-ups for things that we've done wrong in the military. And so that resonates with us, that physical discipline. And so what we take individuals through is this idea that as we're keeping our bees, our breath, we are also practicing mindfulness and being present with our bees. You're not with your bees. If you start getting sloppy and start thinking about other things, the bees are going to remind you that you are not present with them. And they're going to do that by a bee sting. That, I think, resonates with a lot of veterans, as odd as it may seem. And as for some folks, there is the ability to really be in a very, very present mental state in the apiary. And your bees will help you do that. So we look at that as an opportunity for healing. In addition, we have our special events. So for the last 5 years, this year excluded because the Michigan Honey Festival did not happen this year because of COVID. But every year for the last 5 years, we have had a booth at the Michigan Honey Festival where our veterans go and train the general public on beekeeping. And so this is a picture here of Marine Corps veteran Nick Kaminsky showing how to do a mite check on a beehive live at the Michigan Honey Festival. This is an opportunity for our veterans to demonstrate their knowledge to the general public. And one thing I think that a lot of people don't realize about veterans is that most of us that served in the military for any period of time were generally given responsibilities that involved training, whether that's training your squad or running a training program or running a gun range or what have you. Most of these individuals that have served in the military have had the responsibility of having to train others. So it is a natural fit to empower them with the knowledge of beekeeping and then to let them loose out on the communities to share that knowledge. It's not knowledge that we want to hoard. I want to see good beekeepers across the United States. I want to stop seeing all of the bee death that we have going on. In the beekeeping industry, we have beekeepers and we have bee havers. The bee havers are those folks who buy bees every single year and they die every single year. We have a lot of those folks. We don't need more bee havers. We need more beekeepers like these men and women that are training through the Heroes to Hives program. We do evaluations every year as part of the program, and this is some of the things that we have received in the last couple of years as far as evaluations are concerned. We ask our students at the end of the course to rate their confidence levels, and they say that 95% of them have increased confidence in beekeeping due to the Heroes to Hives course. 90% of our students say that they have increased knowledge of disease and pests and how to manage those pests. 90% say they have increased knowledge in monitoring and treating for varroa mites. 97% say they have an improved understanding of overwintering. So for those of us in Michigan, that is the big challenge, is getting your bees through winter. Varroa mite. And then 98% of our students that take the program would recommend this to another veteran. And that's something that I'm very proud of, that our veterans see the value in this and would recommend this to another veteran. In addition to the analytics that I just shared there with you, we also take open comments as part of our evaluations, and we get a lot of testimonials from folks that lead us to believe that this is anecdotal evidence to positive health outcomes happening in the Heroes to Hives program. And I'll talk a little bit more about where we're going with this in the future. But what I'll say is that these testimonials really illustrate that something just beyond learning to be a beekeeper is happening. So what are some of the things that we hear from our veterans? One, this allows me to connect with nature. Many of us that serve in the military that have, especially the process that we are working on oftentimes is split second. So we're making split-second decisions, oftentimes those decisions being life and death, all the time. You're always having to be tasked with these quick, critical decisions. When we come home and we're able to connect with nature, that allows us to slow things down to the cycles of nature. Nothing is split second anymore. And in fact, when we're talking about bees, the efforts that we're giving to rear our bees, to raise them, to manage them, to make sure they're healthy, that they're disease and pest free, those are season-long commitments that are very slow. And so it allows us to kind of slow that split-second decision-making process down as we come back to civilian life. Other comments, allows us to nurture instead of destroy. Many of the men and women who serve in our armed forces are tasked with responsibilities to destroy. We are oftentimes tasked with taking down combatants, going and busting down doors and arresting folks. My job as a Patriot missile fire controller was to secure the airspace above our ground troops, basically to shoot anything out of the sky that wasn't friendly. That destruction and that mode of destruction that you're in the military, especially in combat jobs, that's difficult to come back from. And so what beekeeping allows us to do is it allows us to come back and practice nurture instead of destruction. You know, these individuals that come back from deployments, and oftentimes, especially in the last 20 years, these men and women, many of them have been on multiple deployments, 18 months at a time, overseas, away from our family, away from our kids. That's tough. What we see in these comments, and this next comment, is that it brings us back together. And you'll see there at the bottom, it also engages our families. So what beekeeping offers us the ability to do is as we come back to civilian life, this can bring us back together both as veterans and as our families. When you're gone for 18 months at a time and little Johnny's only 5 years old and you've been on 2 deployments, you've lost 3 years of Johnny's life. Coming back and having something that the whole family can get excited about, beekeeping, that is a great way to rebuild those bonds and to bring us back together. Beekeeping can offer us stability and support. Many of our men and women that have served, they're looking for a little supplemental income. Many of our veterans are what's considered 100% disabled, unemployable, meaning that they can literally not take a job because if they do, their VA benefits. This is an opportunity to have a little supplemental income on the side, to offer a little bit of stability back in our lives. It also allows us to supplement that income, which is something that a lot of veterans are looking for, just a little bit of supplemental income. So where do we go with all of this? We've had over the last 5 years, a lot of anecdotal evidence showing that there are positive health outcomes happening in the Heroes to Hives apiaries. This year, we have begun working with the Second Lady, Mrs. Karen Pence, over the last several months to really kind of look at this in a different way and to bring Heroes to Hives into the fold of helping us identify beekeeping as an evidence-based therapy that can be used in the Department of Defense and the Veterans Affairs hospitals around the United States. So what we're working with we are working with VA and the Department of Defense and their recreational therapy programs to see if we can actually develop a rec therapy program centered around beekeeping that allows us to work with the VA and the DoD to do the long-term health outcome research that we've been longing to do. I'm an entomologist by training, and my colleague, Anna Heck, who is one of our new educators that has joined the Heroes to Hives team this year, she's an entomologist as well. So you got a couple entomologists that are great beekeepers and are running this really great program, but we do not have nearly the background that we need to be doing health research. And so that's what we're leaning on the VA and the Department of Defense for. Hopefully, in the coming years, we will see beekeeping programs as part of rec therapy programs across the United States at VA installations, and then at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. through the Department of Defense. We'll see how this all is going in the future. It's been an ongoing process, and just like everything with the federal, things very low. So we will be working on this through 2021. We do, though, just to kind of note, we are currently working with a beekeeping program as a rec therapy program at a VA hospital in Manchester, New Hampshire currently. And the way that that partnership is working is that we support the education and they do on-ground programming around therapy in their bee yards. So very exciting things coming forward for us. In addition, because we are a national program and we have veterans all across the country participating in the program, we have started to develop a state chapter model. This is a model that we will be looking to partner with other universities, land grant institutions that have beekeeping programs. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to essentially offer the online program through Michigan State University Extension, and then we dovetail that with on-ground experiences in other states for our students that are out of state. Those are students that are out of state. We do have a couple that will travel to Michigan, primarily from Indiana, that'll make the drive to some of our workshops. But a lot of our folks that are outside of state are missing those on-ground workshops. And so we want to offer those in states where they reside. Ideally, I would like to see a Heroes to Hives chapter in every single state. But our first chapter that we are launching in 2021 is with the University of Missouri Extension Service. And they will have the first chapter, the Heroes to Hives of Missouri chapter, starting next year. So they will be doing, their students will be enrolled in our program. But when it comes to on-ground experiences, University of Missouri will be offering those on-ground experiences at an apiary that they have in Missouri. They're starting with one location this year, and then next year, 2022, we'll hopefully expand that to a few other locations and hopefully a few other universities as well. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up today with just a few success stories of our program. I really, the great pleasure of being able to serve that have served our country so honorably. It's always just such an amazing thing for me to be able to watch these individuals just grow. And there's so many stories that I could share, but I've selected a couple tonight that I just wanted to share with all of you. So the first story I'll talk about is Nick Kaminsky. Nick is a Marine Corps veteran, served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he owns Hickory Tree Farm apiaries in Kent City, out there towards Grand Rapids. When I met Nick, he was in our second cohort of the program, the first year at Michigan State University. We were at the time running just at KBS, and we still obviously have an apiary there, but that was our only location at the time. Nick came in, he'd been keeping bees for a couple of years and just really had not had a lot of success getting bees through the winter. He took our course and then very next year had 100% survival. And since then has gone on just beekeeping business. Nick is now a full-time beekeeper. He's actually getting ready to make his first trip out to California for almonds. So for a beekeeper, that's a big deal. And just to kind of put this in perspective, he's also been very active in a lot of veteran programs. And one of the things that he was successful at last year was he competed as part of Grand Valley State University's Veteran Entrepreneurship Lab and won the grand prize of $5,000 for his beekeeping business. So if you're interested in learning more about Nick, his website's down there, hickorytreefarmapiaries.com. The next success story that I'll mention is Tom Kusar and Marie Yeagers. So these two individuals, great folks. The first time I met Tom and Marie, they were really interested in getting into agriculture, but were really struggling to find kind of a way in. Agriculture can be a pretty expensive. If you don't have access to land, that oftentimes is very limiting. And so when I first met Tom and Marie, they were really had I'll say this, they had the most comprehensive business plan I have ever seen come from farmers. They had this amazing business plan and they were trying to find a way to really get into agriculture that allowed them to not have to have the requirements of having a big farm to do that. One of the nice things about beekeeping is it's a very low cost entry to agriculture. There are upfront costs, but you don't have to own land. Lots of people own land and you can put bees on everybody's land that'll allow you to. So it's not something that's limiting. And so Tom and Marie started the program. Tom was part of the program the second year and then Marie joined in the following year and they've been part of the program ever since. And these two individuals really have done some amazing stuff. And one of the things that I think that, Tom and Marie exemplify as part of the program is the creativeness that you can get with honeybees. And so one of the things I think that I've seen this year that they've been doing that's really exciting is infused honeys. So all of these infused flavors that they have with their honey this year, really, really amazing stuff, and has allowed them not only to, produce bees, to produce honey, but also now producing all these value-added products as well. So if you're interested in learning more about them, kusarfarms.com. The last story that I'll share is Gary Brown. Gary's a retired Army veteran, served in Vietnam, and served 21 years in the military, works very actively with the VFW here in Michigan, and owns Gary's Bees in Vermontville, Michigan. Gary is one of those individuals that you give him the knowledge and he is going to run with it, and he has absolutely run with this. And I think that he's getting to the point now where he kind of feels like saturated as far as bees are concerned. He always jokes with me that he had retired and then I looped him into beekeeping, and now he's got a full-time job again. So but Gary does a lot of work around the state. We're actually working together to hopefully start a VFW kind of chapter of Heroes of Hives here in Michigan. And so Gary, again, great person. If you have bees, swarm removals, those types of things, Gary is the guy to go to for swarm removals. And if you want to learn more about Gary, that's garysbees.com. So that's just a few of the stories of the men and women that have been part of our program. And I hope what I'm leaving you with tonight is this understanding that really these individuals that have served in our armed services, these are individuals that understand the importance of national service, and the purpose is larger than themselves. And that is one of the reasons why I feel that the men and women of our military are so well positioned to be the beekeepers of tomorrow. And the ability to train these individuals to do this, to become really good beekeepers, these are the men and women that are going to take this knowledge and share it with their community. They're going to share it with their friends and family. They're going to share it with their battle buddies and their veteran friends that they talk to. I can tell you that when one person gets involved with beekeeping, it is a slippery slope for everybody around them. And so that's another thing, these veterans that are coming together around the VFW, American Legion, around veteran functions, you get one of those individuals interested in bees, and pretty much everybody gets interested. But these men and women, these individuals are well positioned to be that next generation of beekeepers. Now, Heroes to Hives as a program, we could not do this without our sponsors. We are an entirely donation-funded program. And the men and women that participate in this program, 9 months of education that we offer both on ground and online, nobody pays a dime for this. This is all provided by the donation that we receive from our sponsors. And we have a few of them here, some of our corporate sponsors and our university sponsors over the years that have supported our program. I will tell you this, that we would not be able to do this without donations from our sponsors and from men and women like you all that are on this call, on this webinar tonight. We rely absolutely upon your donations, and that is how we bring this programming to our veterans, to our Michigan heroes. This is how we bring it to them, is through your donation dollars. And so every dollar that we get goes directly to this program. And we run a very lean budget, I'll tell you that. To be able to run 6 apiaries and all of this education on less than 1 full-time position, it's an undertaking, but we make it happen. And part of the reason that we are so lean is because we want to make sure that these dollars support the program and the education that goes to it. If you are interested in learning more about our program, heroestohives.com is our website. You will also, at that, and right there up in our banner, the Donate Now button. So if you're feeling compelled after this talk to donate to our program, I would encourage you to go to our website, hit that Donate Now button, and it will guide you through the donation process through our MSU Giving site, which will also be a fully tax-deductible donation that you will get paperwork from MSU to support that for. If you are a veteran or know a veteran that may be interested in this program, no matter where they live across the globe, our application opens November 1st and closes February 28th of every single year. The application period, the way it basically works is you go to our website and you see on November 1st, you will see that button that's highlighted. The Apply Now button will show up on November 1st. It's not there right now. That button will show up. The individual basically will press that button. It will take you through a full application. All the individual has to do that's applying to be part of this program application completely. Once they fill out the application completely, it comes directly to me, and every single person that meets the criteria that we have for the program, basically that you've served in the military or are currently serving in the military, every single person is added to the roster. We have no limit to the number of participants we can have. We almost had 500 participants this last year. I think we had 426 or something like that this year. So we've got plenty of room for folks if they want to participate. We want them there. It doesn't matter, you know, where they're at. We want them there to be part of this commitment to honeybees and this commitment to one another as veterans. We also have a very active Facebook page. So if you're interested in learning more or following our program, please follow us on our Facebook page. And there's also several other Facebook pages that we operate at Michigan State University Extension for beekeeping. We have our pollinators page. We have our Michigan State University Beekeeping Facebook page. We also have YouTube channel. You can search Michigan State University Beekeeping, and our YouTube channel will show up that has all sorts of videos from myself and my colleagues, Megan Milbrath, Anna Heck, Zach Wang, and Dan Lyons, who make up the MSU apiculture team. And I'll leave it with this. If you've got any questions or follow-up or want to get a hold of me to talk about things, you can contact me at my email, ingraoad@msu.edu, or my cell phone. I will say this, that during this pandemic, it is the best way to get a hold of me is my email, because I do live in a very rural area of Michigan and I don't get great cell reception. So if you want to follow up, email is the way to do that. And with that, I will say thank you all very much for listening to my presentation tonight.
Adam, thank you so much. And I think I can hear the applause from the group. A really inspiring story. I want to make sure to thank you for your service to our country, and now for our service to the honeybees and to our country's food security. That point really hit home, and I appreciate you for that, and your program and how it's supporting people.
Thank you, Kara.
Yeah. We'll open it up to questions from our participants out there. So any questions you have for Adam, please put them in the Q&A. And we have our first one from Kate Miller. She asks, when you drive your bees to California for the almonds, how do you recognize them to get them back to Michigan?
That's a great question. It's not something that we often think about. It's like, well, how do you identify when you've got 1.7 million bee colonies in one area of California? How do you determine whose is whose? With their marking, some folks paint their hives kind of outlandish colors. Some will have brands on their equipment. So all sorts of different ways that you can identify which hives are yours when you're recognizing them to bring them back to Michigan from California. I will say this though, I'm a California native. This area of California that we're talking about, the Central Valley, was right kind of over the mountain from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I did my undergrad work. And I will say that this area of California gets crazy during almond season. When you have all of these bees coming out here, all of these brokers working to place bees in places, folks just trying to get enough bees in their yards to be able to get good pollination and good fruit set. It's really an amazing thing to see. But one of the things that is really rampant in that area of California is theft of honeybees. And that is a big industry in the Central Valley, is stealing bees. So that's why it's important to have your bee colonies marked when you bring them out to California, because there is a lot of theft that happens in that area.
That's kind of astounding. How do the bees themselves recognize their hive? What are the mechanisms for that?
Yeah, so they recognize color, and they also recognize orientation. So they'll recognize the combination of colors that you have, or a lot of beehives are just white. And in those situations, it's orientation and where they're located. So bees will actually orient themselves to their location in the landscape based on the position of the sun. And so they know where they are in the landscape based on the positioning that they see via the sun. And that also goes whether it's cloudy or not. So they also have a rudimentary eye called an ocelli. It's kind of like on the top of their head, and it's basically like a light allows them to be able to tell where the sun is located at all times, whether it's cloudy or not. And so that's one of the ways that they orient towards their hives, is by that orientation to the sun.
So, sorry, this is my question to follow up on that. So that makes me think that when you move the hive box is important. Is that true?
Yeah, so I mean, when you move them, you want to generally move them at night or in the early morning when all the bees are in the colony, and you would close up the colony before you move them. And then once you move them, there will be an orientation period where they will have to orient themselves to the new landscape.
Okay. There's another follow-up to that. When traveling, do you seal the hives so the bees don't accidentally fly out?
Yeah, they are generally sealed, but they're closed with screens so that there's still air movement going through the hive, but their bees are not able to get out.
All right. Those are great questions about traveling with the bees. A different track of question from Tim and Jody. How do non-veterans get involved more?
So I guess I'd have a follow-up question. Are we talking about getting involved in Heroes to Hives, or are we talking about getting involved? I would assume we're talking about getting involved in Heroes to Hives. And so I'll kind of take it as that way. If it's different, let me know, Tim and Jody. But if you guys are looking to get involved with Heroes to Hives, right now, I mean, the main ways that folks that are non-veterans that have gotten involved with us really is to serve as kind of mentors for some of our beekeepers. So as individuals transition out of the program, it is a beginning beekeeping program. So it's intended for individuals with under 5 years of experience keeping bees. So we are teaching basic beekeeping knowledge. And so after individuals go through the program, often looking for someone to kind of guide them on more advanced knowledge. So if you're a master beekeeper or been beekeeping for a long period of time and have a great amount of knowledge, that would be a way to support individuals. The other way that I would say that you could support individuals that are part of the program is that, as part of the beekeeping industry in Michigan, I think one of the main things that I try to instill in folks that I work with is that the knowledge that you have is knowledge that should be shared. And so one of the best ways to get involved with our program or with any beekeeping program is to serve as a mentor. And one of the ways that we do that within our program is that, when I have new beekeepers that come to us that have never kept bees before but want to take the program, I always tell them this is not the year to start beekeeping. Take the program first and then start beekeeping next year. But that first year, what we try to encourage is for them to find someone local to shadow all season long. And myself included, I take on a veteran intern every single around all season long, and just to learn kind of the basics and to get their hands dirty in the hives and to get some experience. So that would be probably the best way to support individuals that are part of our program. The veterans that are part of our program is to serve as mentors. And that's just good practice for the beekeeping community in general. Beekeeping is one of those skill sets that we primarily, throughout history, most folks do not go to school to learn to become a beekeeper. Most folks learn from a mentor. And that's really critical to the success of U.S. beekeeping. And I think one of the areas that we've struggled in the last several decades is that there has been a kind of a lull. There was a period where beekeeping was not as exciting as it is now. Last 10 years, we've seen explosions in the interest of beekeepers. But previous to that, there was not a lot of new folks coming into the fold and not a lot of new folks to be able to train. And so we have kind of this gap that and I think that's true with U.S. agriculture. Average age of beekeepers is about the same as the average age of farmers, about 58 to 60 years old. And so we've got this gap where we need to kind of fill this need of the next generation of beekeepers. And this is, I think, a great way to do it. We've got a lot of veterans transitioning simultaneously that are looking for new opportunities. So what a great opportunity to be able to give.
Thanks, Adam. A couple more questions. We're really curious about these bees traveling. So Mike and Dr. Dahl both had a question that's related. Sounds like the travel is probably a little taxing on the bees. Mike asks, do they suffer jet lag? And Dr. Dahl asks, what do you feed the bees as they travel, if anything?
Yeah, so most of the time, if they are being fed during transit, they're being fed sugar water, so a 1-to-1 sugar water diet. And that's generally done with internal frame feeders. So they're feeders inside the hives. Most of the time, though, when you're dealing with transport, you're not generally. Most of the time, there are stores within the hives that'll allow them to kind of keep going for the few days that they're in transit. But if you are feeding during transit, that's what you're generally feeding, or you're feeding them right after you get them off the truck, because they are very hungry. They haven't been out foraging. I will say, as far as the taxing nature and jet lag when traveling, absolutely. So this is an external stressor on honeybees. And there's actually been research at Michigan State University. Zachary Wang did this research a few years back, where they essentially just put bees on a vibrating platform to simulate transit. And then they also took bees and just threw them on a truck and just drove them around Michigan all season long. And what they found was that the act of being moved, that vibration that's being caused by being on a bee, is very stressful on bees and does compromise their immune response. And so what we look at is that, and this goes back to colony collapse disorder, that being such a big problem for commercial beekeepers, but being hard to nail down, is that we have all these extraneous factors that affect commercial bees. We have travel, we have non-target pesticide exposure, we've got just having to reorient, the fact that a lot of times they're in areas where there's only one forage source. And if that forage source is a little late, meaning that bloom starts a little late in almonds, you have literally a moonscape that these bees are in until bloom starts. So there are a lot of stress factors that go into this. And transit is just one of the many stress factors that commercial honeybees are under. I'd like to back up a second, not to say that commercial beekeepers are doing anything wrong. These individuals are critical to US agriculture. This is just the nature of moving animals around the country. Could you imagine if you had to go cattle a couple weeks and move them around the country to a new paddock? I mean, that would just be so stressful on your herd. That's what we're doing with honeybees. We're literally packing them up after a few weeks of being in one place and bringing them somewhere totally different and doing that rotation all season long. Very stressful on the bees, but a very necessary part of US agriculture.
Thanks for sharing that, Adam. So our colleague here at KBS, Andy Foglio, which I'm remembering the initial emails coming through about putting hives on the bird sanctuary, and Andy being really supportive in this conversation. Andy wants you to know that it's truly an honor to help get this going at KBS. And is there anything more that we can do to help grow this service to our regional vets?
Well, I really appreciate that, Andy, and it's been great working with you as well over the years to bring this to KBS. I mean, KBS was the first place to welcome with arms for this program, and so we are very grateful to the role that KBS has played in this program. Right now, there's really, I think, from my perspective, as we continue to grow the program, KBS will always be one of those locations that we look at for educational, opportunities to do on-ground education. I think one of the things that, is kind of unique right now is that this last year has been really kind of a reality check for all of us and, what we're capable of doing from an on-ground standpoint. And so, as soon as the COVID restrictions get going, we'll be back on ground there at KBS, hitting it hard. But I appreciate that, Andy. And if we need anything, I would definitely reach out and let you know.
Thanks, Adam. And the last question is from Gail, and she asks, what do your bees pollinate in Newberry?
What do they? So I know we think of the UP and we think of like just coniferous forest, right? But really, so we have a lot up here. So we have good early season forage for the bees. That's always really nice. Primarily, so I'll talk only for my own personal operation in Newberry. So we are about 1.5 miles away from a very large potato operation that does a lot of great cover crops every season. So this year we had about a 30-acre plot that was sweet clover, and that tends to rotate between about 4 fields that are about 1.5 miles from us. So that's one big thing that they take is a lot of sweet clover. On our own property, our big thing on our property is lavender. So we grow about somewhere between 700 and 800 lavender plants. That is our premium honey. So we do varietal honey. I actually was trained in pollen analysis. So I will take honey samples and analyze them with a microscope to identify what plant materials they collected nectar from. And we produce a varietal lavender It is by far our most popular honey that we produce. And then we also have a lot of orchards. So the farm that we have was originally an apple orchard. So we have a lot of apple trees on the property as well. So yeah, that's primarily what they're pollinating up here, is a lot of that stuff. I will say this, when you live in a place like Newberry or like the UP, most of the forage resources, in order to really make a good honey crop, are things you have to bring to the table. They're not things that exist in the landscape because it is such a forested landscape. So that is something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
In closing, I have a few slides with some of the resources, local and MSU centered, to share with everybody. Fred, did you have any closing comments?
I just wanted to reiterate thanking Dr. Ingrao for a really invigorating, really educational presentation tonight, and for your service, continuing service really, to our country. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you for everybody that was able to watch us in the webinar and on our Facebook live stream. We appreciate it. We hope to see you at other upcoming programs.
We had one more comment in the chat that I think would be a great closing statement. Anonymous attendee says that, Adam, they wanted you to know that they're a first-year beekeeper and they're learning from one of your Heroes to Hive students. So Heroes to Hives is reaching non-service veterans as well. That's
amazing to hear, and I'm so glad to hear that our students are taking the knowledge and running with it. That's what it's all about. It's about, this is not something that we're trying to covet. We're trying to spread the good word about keeping bees. I think you're getting to learn from one of our students.
That's great. Thank you, Misty. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.